Hey y'all, it's Michael, and today I thought I would do a video that I normally do during these Vlogmas time, and that's talking about my favorite podcast of the year. A few years ago, about 2018-ish, I started switching my audiobooks. Instead of listening to them, I started listening to more podcasts. And for me anyways, when you're listening to a podcast versus like an audiobook, I'm listening differently, if that makes any sense. My consumption of podcasts has incredibly tremendously increased for the past few months, like this year alone. And I think I need to do this more often because I don't do it enough. I need to start doing more podcast wrap up. Like maybe that should be one of my goals now I'm thinking about it for 2020, because when I tell y'all I listen to a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts, like a lot. I'm caught up with a lot of them. Like I listen to it like on a schedule, almost like basically every week. So today I thought I would keep this pretty short and not talk about like all the ones that I really enjoyed, but give y'all like a little bit of a snippet on why I really did enjoy them. One of my favorites this year has talk about glow up. The first one is The Read. Obviously they have their own TV show, so that's so exciting. The other one is All Right Mary. This is my favorite in my opinion, the best RuPaul's Drag Race recap of podcast. I love them so much. Every time one of their episodes pops up, I get so excited, like every single time. And I love that they cover not only RuPaul's Drag Race, but also like Dragula, which I love, but also Drag Race Thailand, which I incredibly love. Like season 2 Drag Race Thailand, in my opinion, is the best season of RuPaul's Drag Race, period. Like, my God, the runway, oh my, y'all, the runway, it's so good. That episode, that show is so good. I love it. And then another one that I did want to mention on here that I truly love is Dissect. This is a podcast that I've been following ever since it started, and I love it so much. And this year, the budget went tremendously up, and I'm so happy for him. I'm really happy that especially the support that he's now with Spotify, the quality is just so good. So those are the first 3 that I wanted to mention. Another one that I finally caught up with, I started from the beginning, and I was like, I know I need to start from the beginning, reach the current one, and that's Las Costaristas. I love this podcast so much. It is so funny, and I'm so happy for all of their successes. Because they're both essentially now working at SNL. I just love this podcast so much. It's so funny. That's point blank period. It's just so funny. Even the one with Shangela is so funny from the beginning to the end. I would just laugh from 00 to all the way. I love them. And also the reason why I'm able to listen to so many podcasts is a majority of these, except for Dissect, I listen to 2x, so it goes really fast. Also this year, one thing I found out that I really love enjoying, I love it, is recap episodes of TV shows. I really love these. I come to find out that this is the way I consume media now. So what would happen is I would watch this TV show, and then the week that the new episode would premiere, I would listen to the recap. So yeah, some of those were really good, like Chernobyl, Watchmen, The Good Place, Westworld, Insecure, Killing Eve, Love After Lockup. Watching the show with people and they talk about it, because I don't have that many people in my life that I talk to about TV shows, and the way that these people dive in and dissect the episodes. I just really enjoyed it. Right, y'all, it's kind of cold, but the good thing about it being cold is that the camera won't overheat that much. Quickly go through this because this list was really long and I had to short it down. One of my favorite episodes this year of a podcast, and I listened to this twice, and it's The Nod. So The Nod is a podcast that talks about Black culture. There's so many great episodes. Oh my gosh. The one thing is that there's a lot of ads, but it's not that bad once you get used to it. But I love this podcast. They talk about things I would have never learned. I would highly recommend it. They cover the gamut. It's so much fun. I really enjoyed this podcast. But there is an episode this year that they released that it was funny from the beginning to the end. It's so funny. It's called Oprah's Legends Ball Endgame. This episode was so funny. So a few years back, Oprah did this thing called the Legends Ball. Basically, she got these Black women meeting together, basically for brunch, in Oprah's Magic Land. And when I tell you, this episode is so funny because Brittany, that's one of the hosts, relates it basically to Avengers Endgame, and no matter how you feel about that movie, like whether you like it or not, it made a cultural impact, if anything. Brittany breaks down how this is like the Avengers of Black women. It is so funny, so relevant, and just so, I was like mind boggled how incredible that episode is. If anything, listen to that episode. It is so funny. Like, I'm telling you, it's so funny. The part that killed me was when Oprah gives them gifts, and it's like, y'all can afford this. Or like when they had the sing off, I was like, bruh, it's so funny. It's so good. If you never even watched that episode of Oprah, I would highly recommend it. Like, when I tell y'all this, it's so funny. It's so funny. Another one that I want to mention is one of my favorite podcasts called Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel. This is about Esther Perel, who is a therapist, and we basically listen to people to their therapy session. And there was one that it really struck me. I highly recommend this podcast. I really, really enjoyed it. There was one called Mom and Monique, and this really got to me. I thought it was so just a beautiful episode. Like, beautiful episode. This is about a single mom, and Monique, well, at the time okay, so I'm using the pronouns, but I'm sorry. But at the time, the mom refers to her daughter. But Monique, Monique, see, look, I'm doing it again, I'm sorry. Monique has more of a non-gender pronoun. Monique wants to just be referred to as Monique. But also has this complexity with Monique feeling almost like an afterthought, because Monique's mom has a special needs child, and about this relationship between mother and daughter. It was such a beautiful episode. I was driving when I was listening to this, going to work, and it just, oh my God, I teared up. I was like, oh my God, just the relationship between the two. And it was so relatable for me anyway. Like, I was like, oh my God, it was a beautiful episode. A beautiful episode. Ooh, y'all, it's getting cold and the sun is setting. All right, so I'm gonna go through these, the next ones pretty fast. The first one that I really enjoyed this year was called Broken Hearts. This was so good. This is about these two white women who basically started adopting all of these Black children, and it ends in tragedy because the podcast kind of goes backwards, and we try to see what happened, because in the end, come to find out that like, they drove the car with all of them inside the car. They present themselves in like this perfect world on like social media, but it ends very tragically, as we find out that it's not a spoiler for it, like for the story, but we find out that they drove the car that they were all in over a cliff. And so we find out like what was like really the story behind it. It is so fascinating. Like, it was such a great podcast. The next one is Cold. This one was hard to read. This is about a couple, Susan and Josh Powell, and it covers basically like domestic violence. Josh basically controls Susan. It is, oh my God, just storytelling that is like, I was like, oh my gosh, this was great. The next one is Running from Cops. This is about basically the show Cops. I first heard of this because it's from another podcast with Richard Simmons, and this podcast is really great. I learned so much about how cops, like, I mean, it's one of those shows where I just see it like I watched it before, but this one was so fascinating. It's really interesting. I really liked it. The next one is The Dropout. This is so good. This is about Elizabeth Holmes, who basically was helmed as the next like Steve Jobs. She started this company called Theranos, and it was supposed to be a thing, like a machine that basically people could take home. The machine would tell you from the blood sample how like your health is, but there were so like, basically she scammed a whole bunch of people and like to get the money for it, and it's riveting. I was like, whoa, this is really good. Gangster Capital was really good. This in this season they talked about like the college admission scandal, famous actors who basically scammed the colleges to get their daughters admitted, and it was fascinating. Like this was really fascinating. This is a comedy podcast that I really enjoyed, Jesus and Jollof. This has Yvonne Orji and Lovey Ayaji. Okay, and it was funny. This is just so funny. point blank period, it's just a funny podcast. I really like their banter. Confronting OJ Simpson with Kim Goldman, this was such a fascinating podcast. That's because it's a different point of view than what the media portrays usually involving OJ Simpson. And it was like, oh, just the guts that Goldman has to do this podcast. I was like, wow, girl, I am commending you. This was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this. One that I'm currently like, well, I'm caught up now. It's called Garnett Diaries. This one was really, it's kind of scary. This is basically like internet things happening, like scams, hacks. It's really interesting. I really like it. One that I'm currently listening to right now, and I can see it like being like one that I really enjoy, well, as much as one would like. It's called Hunting Warhead. First off, this podcast is incredibly hard to listen to. I'm gonna let you all know now. It's incredibly hard to listen to. It's about child trafficking and child violence and abuse. When I tell you hard to listen to, there were moments in this when I had to stop, like, because I listened to a lot of podcasts at work. I had to stop and was like, oh my God, like I had to catch a breather, because the things that this person Warhead does to these children, these kids, is like, oh, it's like gut wrenching, and it's just not a good feeling in general. It's Crime Town, The Ballad of Billy Balls. This is so good. This is about Io, who's searching for the killer of Io's mom's stepdad. If that makes any sense, like, yeah. And it's just so, like, it is very intriguing and just so riveting, especially how Io identifies like with like being queer. It is such a great listen, and the things about like the relationship with Io and Io's mom is, I was like, wow, it's really great. I would highly recommend it. And the last one on here is Missing and Murdered, Finding Cleo. This I thought was so fascinating. And this is one of those podcasts where like the ending to it, I really have a connection because I remember where I was. This is about finding Cleo, but it mainly covers how Indigenous people in Canada are essentially treated as with the law, and how these missing Indigenous girls, like no one's doing anything to find them. And here we follow as they try to find Cleo, and the ending to this is so gut wrenching. Like it's this moment of I don't know if I don't use the word catharsis, but it's so beautiful. I remember where I was in, because our store moved, and I was at my old store, and I just remember where I was when that last episode happened, and I was listening to it, and it's like this moment of just, I was like, wow, just wow. Like, I would highly recommend it. I really like that podcast. So yeah, those are the podcasts that I've been listening to. I know there's a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts. If you have any recommendations, please let me know down below. I would love to check them out. When I tell you I listen to a lot, I mean like I'll listen to a lot. There is even more when I was looking through the list. Also, if you have any book ones, I guess, since it's technically a booktube channel, I don't listen to a lot of them just because I consume all my book media through booktube or even like bookstagram, not so much through podcasts, which I should probably start doing. Let me know. I would love to get some recommendations. Any of them, let me know. Like, recommendations galore. And I'm gonna try maybe in the new year to keep up more, like maybe do a like a monthly wrap up of the podcast that I'm listening to. So yes, until then, I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.